history is full of great ideas. This video is about the other ones, the ones people put on their bodies. We're about to explore the most impractical, dangerous, and downright stupid things humanity has ever called fashion, from deadly makeup that corroded the skin to hairstyles that were a literal, well-documented fire hazard. Prepare for a tour of historical decisions that defy all logic. 1. Let's take a trip to the beach circa 1910. You've decided to go for a swim, so you change into your finest bathing costume. It's a modest, full-coverage garment made of thick, heavy wool. Before you even see the water, you're essentially wearing a hot, itchy sweater on a summer's day. But the real horror begins when you take the plunge. That wool suit, designed for modesty, instantly becomes your worst enemy, absorbing an incredible amount of water. It transforms from a garment into a waterlogged sack, stretching, sagging, and threatening to pull you under with its sheer weight. Getting out of the water was a battle against gravity as your suit, now 3 times its original size, tried to make a break for your ankles. It was less a swimsuit and more a personal drowning device designed by someone who hated fun. 2. In the 1770s, French high society decided that hair shouldn't just be styled. It should be a full-blown theatrical production. Women's hairstyles became towering monuments of personal expression, and to celebrate a major naval victory, it became fashionable to incorporate a literal, fully rigged model warship into your hairdo. This wasn't a simple accessory. It was a complex structure built on a wire frame, packed with horsehair pads, and glued together with pomade made from animal fat. Then, the entire flammable concoction was dusted with white flour. These creations were so enormous that women had to travel on the floors of their carriages and couldn't fit through standard doorways. It was the ultimate status symbol, a declaration that you were so important, your head was a national monument. 3. A brilliant smile was the ultimate accessory in the 18th and 19th centuries, but achieving it was a truly ghoulish affair. If you were wealthy and lost your teeth, you didn't get porcelain veneers. You got what were grimly known as Waterloo teeth. This wasn't just a brand name. The finest, most realistic dentures were made from actual human teeth, and the freshest supply came directly from the battlefields of Europe. Ghoulish entrepreneurs would follow armies, prying teeth from the mouths of the thousands of young, healthy soldiers who had just fallen. These were then sold to high-end dentists who would boil them, shape them, and set them into ivory bases for their aristocratic clients. That charming smile you see in a Georgian portrait might just have been looted from a corpse. 4. When a group of wealthy young Englishmen returned from their grand tour of Italy in the 1760s, they brought with them an obsession with pasta and a hairstyle that screamed, "I have more money than sense." They were nicknamed the Macaronis, and their signature look was a ridiculously tall powdered wig, often with a tiny hat perched comically on top. The wig's structural integrity relied on a greasy pomade, often made from rendered bear or pig fat, which was then caked in lead-based white powder. This fragrant, sticky mess was an open invitation for all sorts of vermin, and it was horrifyingly common for these wigs to become infested with lice and, reputedly, even serve as nesting grounds for mice. It was a bold fashion statement that also doubled as a personal mobile biohazard. 5. In the early 20th century, fashion designers unveiled a creation that seemed intentionally designed to punish women for having the audacity to walk. It was called the hobble skirt, and it did exactly what the name suggests. It hobbled them. The design was so aggressively narrow and constricting below the knees that it made taking a normal step impossible. Women were forced to adopt a short, awkward, mincing shuffle just to move forward. This made everyday activities like climbing stairs or simply crossing a street before the light changed a perilous adventure. In an era before widespread automobile use, this trend turned walking, the most basic form of transportation, into a ridiculous and dangerous spectacle, all for the sake of a slender silhouette. 6. If you think today's platform shoes are extreme, allow me to introduce you to their 16th century Venetian ancestor, the Chopin. These were not mere shoes, they were wearable towers. With platforms crafted from cork or wood and reaching heights of up to 50 centimeters or nearly 20 inches, Their main function was to signal extreme wealth and status. The taller your chopines, the more important you were, and the more impossibly long and expensive your dress had to be. Of course, ambulating on these contraptions was a physical impossibility without assistance. A noblewoman in chopines required 2 servants, one on each side, acting as human stabilizers, just to wobble down the street. It was the ultimate fashion statement that said, "I am so rich, I have outsourced the basic function of walking." 7. During the Elizabethan era, the ideal male physique was less about muscle and more about sheer, artificial bulk. The secret to this powerful silhouette was a technique called bombasting, which was essentially turning your clothes into furniture. Men would stuff their doublets and sleeves and trunk hose with an astonishing amount of padding, anything from horsehair and wool to cotton, rags, and even sawdust. This created a comically exaggerated shape with a massive chest and a rounded peas-cod belly that jutted out aggressively. The result was a stiff, almost spherical nobleman who looked incredibly imposing but couldn't bend over, sit comfortably, or likely even dress himself. It was a bizarre arms race of padding, where status was measured by how much useless stuffing you could fit into your pants. 8. The powdered wigs that defined aristocratic fashion in the 17th and 18th centuries were symbols of elegance, but the supply chain behind them was anything but. To achieve a natural look, the most coveted wigs were made from 100% human hair, and the market for this raw material was vast and unsettling. Wig makers sourced hair from a variety of places, often preying on the vulnerable. Desperately poor women would sell their long tresses for a few coins. Prisons would shave the heads of new inmates, and hospitals would shear the hair from fever victims. Most grimly, it was common practice to take hair from the recently deceased, meaning the beautiful flowing wig of a duchess could very well be a blend of hair from a peasant, a criminal, and a fresh corpse. 9. In the mid-19th century, the ideal feminine silhouette resembled a massive bell, and the technology to achieve this was the crinoline. This wasn't just a petticoat, it was a collapsible cage made of steel hoops and fabric tape worn under the skirt. While it freed women from layers of heavy petticoats, it introduced a whole new set of absurd problems. A woman wearing a crinoline occupied the space of about 3 people, making it impossible to walk through a doorway without a complex sideways maneuver. Sitting on a sofa was a gamble that could send the entire cage flying up over your head. A sudden gust of wind could turn you into an unwilling and very undignified parachute. Most terrifyingly, these cages were highly flammable death traps. The wide circumference made it easy to brush against an open fire or a stray ember, and countless women burned to death, trapped inside their own fashionable cages. 10. The Roaring Twenties brought us the iconic flapper, a symbol of modern rebellion and freedom. It also brought us the cloche hat, a fashion accessory that seemed determined to counteract all that progress by making women effectively blind. This deep, bell-shaped hat was designed to be pulled down low, often covering the entire forehead and reaching the eyebrows. To see anything other than your own feet, you were forced to walk with your chin tilted permanently upward in a pose of perceived arrogance. This created a massive blind spot, turning the simple act of crossing a street, now bustling with the new threat of automobiles, into a life-threatening game of chance. It was a trend that perfectly captured the spirit of the era: chic, modern, and recklessly dangerous. 11. Just when you thought fashion's obsession with body modification couldn't get any weirder, the late 19th century introduced the bustle. After the reign of the all-encompassing crinoline, the focus of skirt volume shifted dramatically to the rear. The bustle was a piece of engineering. A wire cage, a set of steel half-hoops, or a horsehair-stuffed cushion strapped directly onto a woman's backside. Its sole purpose was to create a massive, shelf-like protrusion upon which the dress fabric would drape, resulting in an extreme S-shaped silhouette. It was the anatomical equivalent of a centaur, designed to make a woman's posterior look like a piece of furniture you could rest a tea set on. It was a bizarre, cumbersome contraption that proves there's no part of the human body that fashion won't try to artificially inflate. 12. The Victorian era was the golden age of magnificent, elaborate facial hair. A man's mustache was his pride, a work of art that was waxed, curled, and sculpted with military precision. But this masterpiece of grooming had a mortal enemy, the cup of tea. To prevent the tragedy of a drooping, soggy mustache, a brilliant inventor created the mustache cup. This was a teacup with a small, built-in ceramic ledge, or guard, that stretched across the rim. This simple partition protected the glorious foliage from steam and drips, allowing a gentleman to sip his beverage without fear of ruining his carefully coiffed lip brow. It was a hyper-specific solution to a very niche problem, and a perfect testament to just how seriously the Victorians took the structural integrity of their facial hair. 13. Long before men obsessed over bicep curls, the pinnacle of masculine attractiveness in the 18th and 19th centuries was a pair of shapely, well-defined calves. As men's fashion dictated tight-fitting breeches and silk stockings, a muscular leg was on full display. For those gentlemen not blessed by nature with athletic lower legs, there was no need for despair, you could simply buy them. Men would wear artificial calves, which were padded inserts made of cork, fabric, or even wood, strapped to their shins beneath their stockings. This created the illusion of a strong, robust leg, much like a modern-day padded bra. It was a widespread and openly acknowledged form of sartorial deception, proving that male vanity and the desire to enhance one's assets is certainly not a modern invention. 14. If you were to travel back to ancient Greece or Rome, you'd find that one of our modern beauty nuisances was their ultimate beauty goal, the monobrow. Far from being plucked or waxed into oblivion, a single, unbroken brow was considered the absolute height of beauty and a clear sign of great intelligence and purity in women. For those who weren't genetically gifted with a continuous brow, faking it was a top priority. They would use powders like kohl or antimony to carefully paint a bridge between their eyebrows, creating the illusion of one glorious, unified statement. For a more textured look, some women would even use tree resin to glue on patches of goat hair. It's a stunning reminder that beauty standards are completely arbitrary and often completely ridiculous. 15. The iconic princess hat you see in fairy tales is based on a real and utterly impractical piece of headwear from the 15th century called the hennin. This was a tall, cone-shaped or steeple-shaped hat worn by European noblewomen, and its height was a direct indicator of the wearer's social status. The wife of a nobleman might wear a cone a foot high, while a princess could sport one that was 3 feet tall. Balancing this towering, often jewel-encrusted cone was a feat in itself, and it was usually accompanied by a long, flowing veil that trailed from the tip. Beyond the constant threat of toppling over, the hennin made navigating the world a logistical nightmare. Wearers had to perfect a constant stoop to fit through doorways, making them look less like regal figures and more like they were perpetually searching for a lost contact lens. 16. The fontange hairstyle was a trend born from a happy accident that quickly spiraled into architectural madness. As the story goes, it began in the late 17th century when a mistress of King Louis XIV had her hair come loose during a hunt and hastily tied it up with her garter. The king adored the look, and thus a fashion craze was ignited. But this was the court of the Sun King, where moderation was a foreign concept. The simple ribbon arrangement rapidly evolved into a towering structure of pleated lace, ribbons, and hair built upon a wire foundation. It grew progressively taller each year, reaching such absurd heights that hairdressers were called architects. It was a gravity-defying, flammable monument to royal whim that became so top-heavy and ridiculous it eventually collapsed under its own fashionable weight. 17. The 1940s and 50s gave us many iconic looks, but none were as pointedly aggressive as the bullet bra. This wasn't a piece of lingerie designed for subtle support. It was an undergarment weapon system. The bra featured sharply conical, spirally stitched cups that transformed a woman's natural bust line into a pair of torpedo-like projectiles. Popularized by Hollywood sweater girls like Jane Russell, the look was meant to be dramatic and attention-grabbing, and it certainly succeeded. The effect was so extreme that it looked less like natural anatomy and more like you were smuggling a pair of ice cream cones under your sweater. It was a bizarre moment in fashion, where the ideal feminine silhouette was apparently modeled on the front bumper of a 1957 Cadillac. It's a look that perfectly captures the post-war era's blend of glamour and barely concealed hostility. 18. For 1,000 years in China, one of the most revered symbols of beauty was a physical deformity achieved through unimaginable cruelty, the practice of foot binding. Starting when girls were as young as 4, their feet were broken and tightly bound in bandages, forcing the arch to collapse and the toes to fold underneath the sole. The goal was to create a tiny 3-inch lotus foot, which was considered the pinnacle of feminine refinement and eroticism. A woman with bound feet was a status symbol for her family, proving they were wealthy enough that she would never need to work or even walk properly. She was a beautiful crippled ornament, destined to hobble in pain for the rest of her life. It is one of history's most brutal examples of fashion as a form of patriarchal control, a horrifying trend where extreme suffering was rebranded as exquisite beauty. 19. The quest for a pale complexion has taken many strange turns, but few were as self-destructive as the 16th century trend of using Venetian ceruse. This was a highly coveted skin whitener, a thick paste made from a mixture of vinegar and white lead. Aristocratic women, most famously Queen Elizabeth I, slathered this toxic concoction all over their face, neck, and chest to achieve a ghostly porcelain white look that signified they never had to toil in the sun. The problem was, it was pure poison. Prolonged use caused the skin to corrode, leading to permanent scarring, which then required even more ceruse to cover it up, creating a vicious cycle. It also led to hair loss, tooth decay, and severe lead poisoning, which could result in paralysis and death. They were literally dying for beauty, slowly poisoning themselves for the sake of a perfectly white face. 20. After you had achieved the perfect, deathly pale complexion using your favorite lead-based makeup, the next step for a true 18th century fashionista was to highlight just how delicate and translucent your skin was. And what better way to do that than by drawing on a set of fake veins? To emphasize their supposed aristocratic fragility, some women would take a fine-tipped blue pencil and delicately trace a network of veins onto their neck, chest, and shoulders. This was the ultimate subtle flex. A way of saying, my blood is so blue and my skin is so clear, you can practically see right through me. It was a bizarre, almost vampiric touch of faux vulnerability, a finishing detail that took the art of artificial beauty to a whole new, slightly unsettling level. It was the historical equivalent of today's contouring, but for your circulatory system. 21. During the late Middle Ages and the early Renaissance, the ideal female face was a high, smooth, and expansive forehead, which was considered a sign of wisdom and aristocracy. To achieve this look, women went to extreme lengths. They would meticulously pluck or shave their hairlines, sometimes removing several inches of hair to create a vast, domed forehead. But they didn't stop there. To further elongate the face and draw all attention to this magnificent forehead, they would also pluck out most, if not all, of their eyebrows and even their eyelashes. The result was a strange, serene, and almost alien-like appearance that was considered the height of sophistication. It's a powerful reminder that whatever your least favorite beauty chore is, medieval women probably did a more painful and extreme version of it. 22. In the royal courts of 17th and 18th century Europe, a tiny speck on your face could speak volumes. These were mouches, or beauty patches, small pieces of black velvet, silk, or taffeta cut into shapes like circles, hearts, stars, or even a horse-drawn coach. They were glued to the face, ostensibly to cover blemishes or smallpox scars, but they quickly evolved into a complex and flirtatious secret language. The placement of a single patch was a coded message. A patch near the eye meant, "I am a passionate lover." One on the cheek signaled that you were married, while a patch on the upper lip declared you were single and available. It was a sophisticated system of nonverbal communication, allowing courtiers to gossip, flirt, and negotiate affairs with the mere placement of a black dot. It turned the human face into a public bulletin board for romantic intentions. 23. For centuries, a bright white smile has been the beauty standard in the West. But in Japan, for a very long time, the exact opposite was true. The practice of ohaguro involved intentionally dyeing one's teeth jet black. This was seen as a mark of immense beauty, sophistication, and marital fidelity. The process was a painstaking ritual involving a foul-tasting concoction of iron filings dissolved in vinegar, which was then mixed with vegetable tannins. This liquid was painted onto the teeth daily, creating a durable, lacquer-like black finish. While it might seem bizarre to us, the blackening was thought to complement the pale face makeup of the time and was also believed to help prevent tooth decay. It was a profound statement of beauty that turned what we consider a dental nightmare into the ultimate symbol of civilized elegance. 24. The eyes are the window to the soul. And in Renaissance, Italy, women wanted those windows to be as wide and captivating as possible. To achieve this, they turned to a plant with a deceptively beautiful name, belladonna, which literally translates to beautiful lady. They would squeeze the juice from the poisonous berries of this deadly nightshade plant and apply the drops directly into their eyes. The active chemical, atropine, would block the receptors in the eye muscles, causing the pupils to dilate dramatically. This created a dark, alluring, doe-eyed look that was considered irresistible. The obvious downside was that it also caused distorted vision, an inability to focus on close objects, and, with prolonged use, could lead to light sensitivity, increased heart rate, and eventual blindness. It was a dangerous gamble, blurring your vision of the world for the sake of being more beautiful to look at. 25. You think beauty standards today are demanding? In many ancient cultures across the globe, the ultimate status symbol was a completely reshaped head. The practice of artificial cranial deformation involved binding an infant's head while the skull was still soft and malleable. By applying constant pressure with boards, pads, and tight cloth wrappings, the skull could be molded into a variety of desirable shapes, most commonly an elongated conical form. This was practiced by cultures as diverse as the Huns, the Maya, some ancient Egyptians, and even certain groups in France. A dramatically elongated head was a clear, permanent, and very visible marker of nobility. It was a sign that you belonged to an elite class that was so far above the common, round-headed folk that you looked like a different species altogether. It was perhaps the most extreme and irreversible fashion statement in human history. 26. For the fashionable gentleman of the late 18th century, a walking cane was more than just a support or a weapon. It was a sophisticated piece of multifunctional gear, a sort of proto-Swiss army knife for the elite. These were known as walking libraries or system canes, and they were ingeniously hollowed out to contain a secret world of gadgets and conveniences. While a concealed sword was common, a true connoisseur's cane might also contain a telescope for spying on rivals at the opera, a flask for a discreet nip of brandy, a set of writing implements for jotting down sudden inspiration, or even a miniature toolkit. Some were even fitted with musical instruments or fishing rods. It was the ultimate accessory for a man who wanted to project an air of being prepared for absolutely any situation, from a duel to a sudden urge to go fishing. 27. During the High Middle Ages, a man's status could be measured by the length of his toes, or rather, the length of his shoe's toes. This was the era of the Krakow, or poulain, a shoe with a bizarrely elongated pointed toe that could extend up to 2 feet beyond the foot itself. The length was strictly regulated by law. A prince could wear points of any length, a nobleman's could be up to 2 feet, a gentleman's 1 foot, and a commoner's a mere 6 inches. These ridiculously long tips made walking a clumsy, shuffling affair. And for the most extreme versions, the point had to be tied with a small chain to the wearer's knee, just to prevent them from tripping over their own feet. It was one of the most impractical and ludicrous footwear trends in history, proving that men will do anything to add a few inches. 28. Why settle for one color when you can wear 2 or even 4 all at the same time? In the 14th and 15th centuries, a bold and popular fashion for European aristocrats was party-colored clothing. This involved constructing a single garment, where the left and right sides were made from completely different, often clashing fabrics and colors. A nobleman might wear a tunic that was brilliant blue on one side and blood red on the other. This extended to their leg wear, wearing one green stocking and one yellow one, a look known as my party. This striking asymmetrical style was a way to show off the family's heraldic colors, or simply to display their wealth, as it required purchasing and tailoring multiple expensive fabrics for a single outfit. It turned the human body into a walking coat of arms, a vibrant and very literal fashion statement. 29. In Elizabethan England, good dental hygiene was rare, but showing off that you cared about it was the height of fashion. While most people's teeth were rotting away from sugar, the truly wealthy sported a very particular accessory, a toothpick. But this wasn't some disposable wooden splinter. An aristocratic toothpick was a lavish piece of jewelry, often crafted from gold, studded with gemstones, and worn on a chain around the neck like a pendant. After a meal, it was considered a sophisticated power move to ostentatiously produce your bejeweled pick and meticulously clean your teeth in front of everyone. It was a subtle way of showing off not only your wealth, but also the fact that you had just eaten a meal substantial enough to require a cleaning, and that you still had teeth left to clean. 30. In Imperial China during the Qing dynasty, one of the most potent symbols of elite status was something you could grow yourself: extraordinarily long fingernails. High-ranking scholars, mandarins, and aristocrats would cultivate the nails on one or both hands, particularly the pinky and ring fingers, to grow several inches long, sometimes curling into elegant spirals. This was the ultimate proof that they were members of the leisure class who had never and would never perform any kind of manual labor. Such delicate nails would snap instantly with any physical work. To protect these symbols of their idleness, they wore ornate, jewel-encrusted nail guards made of gold or silver. It was a lifelong commitment to a fashion statement that rendered your hands almost completely useless, turning them into a living testament to your own pampered existence. 31. The massive, wheel-like ruff collar of the late 16th and early 17th centuries is an icon of Elizabethan and Jacobean portraiture. It was a symbol of extreme wealth and status, made from fine linen, folded into intricate figure-8 pleats, stiffened with starch, and supported by a wire frame. But while they looked regal, they were a practical nightmare, especially at mealtime. The sheer circumference of a large ruff made it physically impossible to bring food from your plate to your mouth with a normal utensil. This led to the popularization of extra long-handled forks and spoons, allowing the wearer to bypass the obstacle of their own collar. It was a cumbersome, neck-bracing fashion that was so restrictive it literally required its own specialized set of cutlery just so the wearer wouldn't starve. 32. The corset is famously associated with women's fashion, a symbol of restrictive beauty standards. But for a significant period in the 19th century, men were also squeezing themselves into these body-shaping garments. The dandy, a man devoted to impeccable style and a refined appearance, would often wear a corset to achieve the fashionable male silhouette of the time: a narrow, wasp waist, a broad chest, and an upright, military-like posture. It was seen as essential for a clean, tailored line under a waistcoat and coat. While some argued it was for postural support, it was really about vanity. This trend was frequently mocked in satirical cartoons of the era, which depicted men struggling to breathe or being tightly laced up by their valets. It's a fantastic reminder that the absurd and painful pursuit of a perfect physique has never been exclusive to one gender. 33. Today, we have mascaras that can survive a swimming pool and a feature-length tearjerker. But in the early 20th century, the first commercially available mascaras were a far grittier and more disastrous affair. The recipe was less cosmetic science and more of a garage experiment. A simple, charming blend of petroleum jelly and fine coal dust. This goopy black paste did an admirable job of darkening lashes, but it had one catastrophic design flaw. It had the water resistance of a paper towel. The slightest provocation, from a single emotional tear to a bit of humidity or a sudden rain shower, would cause the concoction to instantly dissolve. The result wasn't just a smudge. It was a full-blown facial meltdown, with the black mixture streaming down the wearer's face in dramatic, inky rivers. It was a look that screamed less Hollywood glamour and more gothic raccoon having an existential crisis. It was a makeup product that guaranteed any minor emotional moment would instantly become a public spectacle of cosmetic failure. This was just a glimpse into the vast museum of bad fashion choices. We've covered 33, but history is littered with hundreds more. In fact, there's one famously idiotic trend we didn't even touch on. What's the most unforgivable fashion crime we failed to put on this list? Expose our historical blind spots in the comments. While you're down there, a like and subscribe helps us uncover more of humanity's terrible decisions.